from the combined newsrooms of KARK4 and Fox 16, breaking news coverage.
I'm Drew Petrimo, joined by Marcy Manley. We are broadcasting live on Fox 16 and KARK News. We are coming to you live from the governor's conference room inside the state capitol as we wait a governor's press conference on a controversial bill known as the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. This has been something we've been following very closely here in the last several days and weeks here at the Capitol. I want to get you guys updated on exactly what this bill entails, and for that, Marcy, why don't you fill us in kind of on what's at stake?
Well, this went through the House yesterday, and it's been billed as a religious protection bill to provide strict scrutiny when the state wants to infringe or creates laws that could possibly infringe on religion. But opponents of the bill have said that they believe this paves the way for discrimination, particularly among the LGBT community. Even those people who say that they support the ideas of RFRAs as they're known aren't sure that they were going to be able to support this bill and actually voted against it, saying the language simply veers too far away from federal RFRA law. So you have a number of groups voicing some concerns about this bill and leading to protests and things of that nature, and leading to the culmination here today.
We've seen a lot of protests here at the Capitol over the last couple of days, but it's not just them. Major corporations have come out in opposition to this bill. Walmart, Axiom, the Little Rock Chamber of Commerce, Little Rock's mayor, and a slew of other countries have come out not just in opposition to this bill, but also one that's seen as similar that passed the legislature in Indiana. So this is not just a controversy that we are seeing here in Little Rock. And some of the implications that we've seen concern how this will be applied. People feel that are opposed to this bill feel that it will lead to discrimination, especially against the LGBT community. A lot of the signs we've seen here and the groups that have come to town have come to talk about exactly those feelings. Also, we know that the pressure that has come with those groups voicing their opposition. I've heard that the governor's office has received thousands of emails urging him to go against this bill, but there's also been passionate support in favor of it, including major votes in support in both the House and Senate.
Yeah, overwhelming support in some of these houses, or both houses rather, the Senate and the House. From a legislative perspective, we have seen thousands of people coming up to the governor's office to sign the visitor's log, signing petitions that are expected to be delivered to the governor today. But there are those who have been outspoken saying my religious freedom doesn't need to be infringed on by anyone, regardless of what community you belong to. And then there are those who say private business rights need to be respected. There's a lot going on in this discussion. I think that raises a lot of issues. It's been sort of broken down into LGBT versus religion, but there's a lot of gray in between. I spoke with State Rep Camille Bennett yesterday, and she said that she was worried about private litigation that could come out of this bill, she believed, from how it is worded in regards to state laws, that companies could sue one another and that private entities could sue one another. She also didn't know what the impact would be for employees of state agencies, and then the beliefs that are written in to be covered into this law, how a court would be able to interpret that. She described it as a possible Pandora's box. I've talked to local mayors who aren't sure how this would impact their city governance as far as when they would be able to actually do the work of the city without taking into consideration every single religious belief out there. And Mayor Tab Townsell telling me in Conway that he believed it might have a paralyzing effect on a city or local government's ability to actually carry out the business of government. So there are a lot of people watching and waiting, anticipating what Governor Hutchinson does here today.
Right, and this kind of comes against the backdrop of what happened in Indiana, where the governor came back after the bill was passed and said they needed to make some changes and clarifications, and you have to wonder if the governor here will take those things into consideration. He has said in the past that he would sign the bill as it is currently amended, so long as it replicates to a certain degree what is being done at the federal level. So he has given some indication that he would support this, but the backlash he has to be feeling has to be something that he has to consider.
Yeah, we might point out that some people have thought that the way he worded that statement on Monday might give him an out in addressing this bill, because people are pointing out that it doesn't necessarily reflect other RFRAs that have passed and other laws, doesn't reflect the federal RFRA, and so they're saying maybe that provides him an opportunity to negotiate around this controversy or to take an alternative step. And so it remains to be seen if that's the case, and if he interprets it that way, I'm sure he'll provide the reasoning behind whatever his decision is. But that is one point that people have brought up, that his statement was worded that way. Will it provide an opportunity to reflect or re-navigate?
And this all comes at the very end of the legislative session. It was supposed to end today or tomorrow, was the thinking going on. Through my reporting, I can say that there has been talk of the possibility of the session going a little bit longer. How long, and what exactly that means about what the governor is going to say here. We're going to probably find out here when the governor walks out of those doors. One thing that we can talk about here is what his options are, and of course one of them is obviously a veto, but the numbers of the legislators that voted in support of this, he might come to the conclusion, as he did with another controversial bill along these same issues. He said he felt like with HB1228 that his veto would have been futile because he could have been overridden very easily in the legislature. That might be his thinking along this line, but with there still being some time left in the legislative session, you wonder if as what we've seen in Indiana, they're looking for some kind of a fix that could make this more acceptable to all sides.
I think if we're looking at a fix, I would be interested to see what that is. Representative Bob Ballinger was presented with questions about adding a non-discrimination clause to the bill. And he wasn't open to that idea because he did feel like a certain amount of discrimination has to be built into choices and decision making. And so he seemed reluctant to do that, and that seems to be the biggest contention that people have, even given the clause in the bill that this respects federal civil rights law. So I would be interested to see what that workaround would be and how quickly it could be done, given that it's at the end of the session.
Laser focused on Arkansas right now. We've seen the national news media here. Representative Ballinger, who you just talked about, has been on all the national programs trying to explain this bill. It's creating an uproar and a lot of talk on social media. For that, we want to toss back to Mallory in the studio. She's watching some of that.
Drew and Marcy, thank you so much. As we await Governor Hutchinson's press conference to begin, we are monitoring social media. Quite the storm happening right now as we await this press conference. Yesterday, social media taking off with this passing through the House, and Hillary Clinton, former Secretary of State, former Arkansas First Lady, just tweeting out moments ago this tweet you see right here. Clinton saying, like Indiana law, Arkansas bill goes beyond protecting religion, would permit unfair discrimination against LGBT Americans. I urge the governor to veto. That tweet coming from Hillary Clinton just moments ago. Also a tweet that is getting a lot of movement on social media is from Walmart. We will have more in a moment, but I believe the press conference is beginning right now.
Good morning. I wanted to invite Speaker Gillum and President Dismang to join me if they're in the audience there. I appreciate our legislative leaders and how they've conducted themselves throughout the session and including this process. As everyone knows, House Bill 1228 is now on my desk, and it's time for me to take a look at it and make some comments in reference to it. This is a bill that in ordinary times would not be controversial, but these are not ordinary times. This bill is not really complicated. The bill itself restates the standard of review for the courts to consider in determining First Amendment privileges as weighed against the compelling interest of the state. That's simply stated as a summary as to what this legislation does. It's a balancing test. The bill itself does not pick winners and losers. It balances two competing constitutional obligations that our founding fathers gave to us. But the issue has become divisive because our nation remains split on how to balance the diversity of our culture with the traditions and firmly held religious convictions. It has divided families, and there is clearly a generational gap on this issue. My son, Seth, signed the petition asking me, Dad, the governor, to veto this bill. And he gave me permission to make that reference. And it shows that families, and there's a generational difference of opinion on these issues. So where are we now in reference to this legislation? I have asked through this process of our legislative leaders and members that certain changes be made. In some instances, they were accommodated and changed. In other instances, they said no. And that's the balance between the executive and the legislative branch. I certainly respect those bodies. It's been my intention all along that House Bill 1228, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, be crafted in a way that mirrors the Federal Religious Freedom and Restoration Act that was passed in 1993 and was signed by President Clinton. I came to Congress after that, but I sat on the Judiciary Committee in the House of Representatives that considered these amendments, had hearings on this Federal Religious Freedom and Restoration Act, and so I'm somewhat familiar with it and how it's played out across the country. And it was my intention, because the federal law does not cover state causes of action, that we have a similar law in Arkansas. And but we wanted to have it crafted similar to what is at the federal level. And to do that, though, changes need to be made. The bill that is on my desk at the present time does not precisely mirror the federal law. It doesn't mirror it in a couple of ways, particularly allowing the First Amendment to be asserted in the private litigation between parties, or the reliance upon the state law and those claims. Therefore, I asked that changes to be made in the legislation. And I've asked that the leaders of the General Assembly to recall the bill so that it can be amended to reflect the terms of the Federal Religious Freedom and Restoration Act. In the alternative, it can be simply have some language changes so that those accommodations and changes can be made. So it can either be done by recalling the legislation or having additional legislation that would accomplish those changes. Again, this is difference between the executive branch, the legislative branch. We all have our responsibilities. We all have our different viewpoints. My responsibility is to speak out on my own convictions and to do what I can as governor to make sure this bill reflects the values of the people of Arkansas, protects those of religious conscience, but also minimizes the chance of discrimination in the workplace and in the public environment. It is important to recognize that the bill, even as currently drafted, does not change who we are. And it does not change the current protections against discrimination. This bill simply defines the standard to determine the right balance. But how do we as a state communicate to the world that we are respectful of a diverse workplace, and we want to be known as a state that does not discriminate but understands tolerance? That is the challenge that we face. Making this law like the federal law will aid us in that effort in communication, but also it was my original objective from the beginning. Another option is that we're looking at is to utilize an executive order, which interestingly has not been utilized for my research from the executive branch and state government in terms of protecting against discrimination in the workplace for state government. but we're looking at an executive order to aid in that communication and to make it clear that Arkansas wants to be a place of tolerance. We want to be a place that has the right balance between religious protections and religious freedom and non-discrimination. Also, I think we can be assured that this will continue to be a robust debate in the future. I understand that a ballot title has been approved by the Attorney General that may put on the ballot an extension of the civil rights protection to additional classes of citizens of Arkansas. That debate will continue and ultimately be determined by the people of this state, either through their legislative body or through a vote of the people. And so this conversation does not end. I've expressed my view to the legislature. It is up to them to respond to the request of the governor that changes be made in the current bill to make it reflect the federal law that I think sets the right tone for Arkansas in its future. We'll look at additional action down the road as needed, partly depending upon the action that the legislature might take. With that, I'll see if the President has any comments.
Thank you, Governor. First, let me say that I support a RFRA in this session. I think that the majority of both chambers support a RFRA being passed this session. I think there are some complications, and if I'm just being blatantly honest, I've been in the middle of the budget debate probably as much as anything else the last few days. I'd asked some brief questions about the language that we were passing and actually felt like we were mirroring and actually given some assurances that we were mirroring that federal legislation. And it's my understanding through the business community, other folks in the state of Arkansas, that that was not the case, that this is not, does not mirror the federal RFRA language, and will actually open the door to some probabilities or uncertainties. I think what we should pass should be something that's predictable. The federal RFRA has been debated, it's been through courts, and there are standards in place and an understanding of what the result of that passage would be here in the state. With the legislation that we have before us, that certainty is not there. And so, again, I support us moving forward. I support, and right now, just to be candid, we are having those discussions in the Senate about making those alterations. There's not a conclusion to that discussion, but we want to be sure that our membership has all the information they can in front of them, and they can make a decision if this is like a change in the course that they'd like to take. Thank you, Governor.
Questions? Roby?
So, do you have agreement from the legislators that you need for this plan to work, for the bill to be recalled and then go down there federal law? Do you have agreement?
I do not. I've communicated to them my desire. I've made the request to them. I've spoken to the House caucus. I've spoken to the leadership, but I do not have a commitment as to what action they will take.
Governor, if this were not fixed, for want of a better word, and you issued the executive action, would that have any bearing on private lawsuits, or would that simply for state agencies? In other words, would that actually fix the problem that you're addressing? It separates it from federal.
You mean if it's not fixed?
If it goes forward as what is under desk,
right,
and you issue executive action, presumably that would only apply to state agencies. Therefore, the issue of private lawsuits would also be.
Yes, correct. My executive order will not be the same as the legislative fix. I think the executive order that I'm working on will help in terms of setting the right example of tolerance in this state, will help frame the debate, will help lead our state in terms of expectations of state action, but it will not, but the governing law will be the bill that is ultimately signed into law, the State Religious Freedom and Protection Act.
Governor, just to be clear, if you don't get the legislative remedy that you are seeking, are you still resolved to sign one?
My position is clear. I've asked them to remedy it. I've asked them to change the current law, and I've asked them to recall it and change the language on it. That's my request today.
Are you leaving your options open then?
I will just say I've asked the legislature to do that, and I will make further comments after we determine what action they will take. Yes?
Why now, since this bill has not substantially changed since introduced, all the problems have been known from the beginning? Why has it gotten so long?
Well, one, we have made requests for changes, but the legislative process is not perfect. You learn as you go on. Many in the community engaged in this very late. Obviously, we've been enacting a lot of different legislation, so part of the, there's been insufficient attention to some of the details, perhaps, as has gone through the legislative process, but it comes to a focal point. But some of the changes I've asked has been communicated previously. So, and I've said it very clear publicly that I think the language I've used is I would support a RFRA that mirrors federal law and is similar to what's been passed in 20-some other states. Now, obviously there's some variations there, but that's what I've asked for. That has been my position, and we just didn't quite get it perfect through that legislative process. Now, it might be perfect from some people's viewpoint. They obviously could be very happy with the additional language that is in the Arkansas RFRA, but I have preferred the federal standard on that, and that's what I've asked them to do. Well, I want what is reflected in the federal RFRA law because, as the President said, this has got court cases. You've got a body of law that has interpreted that's very helpful and good guidance. So that's what I think is the right solution there. Again, this legislation is not about picking winners and losers. This legislation is about the right standard and the right balance that courts can interpret this. And so that ultimately, that sense of fairness will be determined by the courts. What is important from an Arkansas standpoint is that, one, we get the right balance, and secondly, we make sure that we communicate that we are not going to be a state that fails to recognize the diversity of our workplace, our economy, and our future. Janelle.
You have said all along that you appreciated the federal RFRA law, but you did also say that you would sign the bill after it had been amended in its current form. You had made that promise to Ballinger. Going back on that now, what was it that changed your mind?
Well, as I've said, there's been a learning process through all of this. We've heard from constituents all across Arkansas, business leaders, and so I have said that I would sign a law that is similar in fashion to the federal law or what's been in 20 other states. Whenever you look at what is on my desk, it does not mirror the federal RFRA law, and that's what I prefer, and that's what I would ask them to do.
Members of the LGBT community was supposed to say that there is no protection in state law for discrimination for them. So how can there be a balance between religious freedom and their rights? Do you support changing state law to create protection for the LGBT community?
Let me make it clear that this law that is under consideration does not extend discrimination, and that's important. Now, as to whether our civil rights law in Arkansas needs to be changed, that is a debate that's going to happen. I want to focus on what is needed right now. I do think that this bill that would be modeled after the federal law would help achieve that right balance and guidance for the courts and the right standard.
So you had given this some thought, though, how you weigh that kind of crux of this whole debate, whether you think sexual orientation, gender identity should have the same civil rights protections as gender, race, national origin. What's your answer to that question?
Well, the issue on the table is the Freedom Restoration Act, which I want to see enacted in Arkansas in the right form. In terms of where we go as society, I don't believe in a workplace that discriminates. I just, whether it's Tyson's or whether it's Walmart or whether it's Dillard's or whether it's state government, and I will express that view in an executive order when that's prepared.
Governor, several of the larger private sector businesses across the state, large employers, have urged you to veto this bill through public statement. And you had direct communications with these leaders, and if so, what role do these conversations play in your call for their amendments?
I have had some communication personally with some of the business leaders across the state. Others have communicated in different fashions, and they raised an important issue. And I don't think it's necessarily based upon what's in this law as much as how it's being construed nationally. And so it is a concern, and that's why we have to, as a state, look for means to communicate that we recognize the diversity of our workforce. We are an international community in terms of housing the headquarters of international businesses here in this state, and we want to be able to compete in that market. So this is both about substance, which is getting this legislation right, and it's also about communicating to the world and to our neighboring states that we're a state that recognizes the diversity of the workforce, the need for non-discrimination, and that we want to accomplish that. And so we have to look for ways to communicate that effectively. That's what we're doing right now. And the businesses are doing that right now, and they've really been good partners to communicate that very effectively. Yeah.
Can you guys cobble the votes together to get done what the governor wants to get done? What do you have to do? Where are you now in terms of commitment?
Let me say first and foremost that the House of Representatives, as we have all session long, is committed to working with the Senate and the governor for solutions on this issue, as we have with a host of many others. We're working through the process now. We're seeing what the dynamics are going to be and what the logistics, and we're going to take them as we go. So.
I'm sorry. No, please.
I mean, the one thing that we want to make sure is that each member has a chance to take a look at the language that we're discussing, and I think before that it's probably premature to say that that there's going to be an agreement. I would hope that there is one. Again, really from my perspective, because of the uncertainty that the language has in place if it were to become law. And one thing I do want to say and I think I won't speak for each member, but I will say I've not spoken to a member that wants RFRA, even this state version, to be something that allows for discrimination. I think I would challenge anyone to find a member that would say that they're wanting to utilize this RFRA law to allow for further discrimination. And I think that's important in the context of what we're talking about doing, because if we do utilize the federal RFRA and its language, which is proven, which has been through the court process, I think we have the same result as even we had if we were to pass and continue on with the state language, with the exception we have certainty, which again I think is important. So thank you.
Listen, this conversation will continue.
You heard it, Governor Asa Hutchinson today saying that changes need to be made. He is recalling House Bill 1228, saying at this time it does not mirror federal law. He would like to see changes made, saying in that press conference that he wants Arkansas to be known as a state that does not discriminate, a state that tolerates, and a state that businesses want to come here and do business here in Arkansas. So more to come with this, as again, Governor Asa Hutchinson saying that House Bill 1228 needs to be recalled. Social media, a lot coming in as this press conference is happening. Arkansans weighing in. Anastasia here says she is shocked that he is not going to sign it, saying, well, there is a silver lining in all of this after all, if only for a short while. This tweet coming in from Luther Lowe. He's in public policy for Yelp, saying that it is huge that Asa Hutchinson will not sign this bill as written. Luther works for Yelp, which is one of the companies, saying that they would not come to Arkansas. More coming out throughout the day about this today at noon on Arkansas Today. We'll see you then. Have a great day.